I'm going to call to order the Subcommittee on Communications and Technology. I want to thank our witnesses for being here today. Just at the outset, I would tell you that they expect votes on the House floor at about 10:50 or thereabouts. So I think we'll get through our opening statements. I doubt we get to your presentations initially, but then we're going to come back right after those votes and proceed. And so I will start. Last March, the subcommittee met to conduct our first oversight hearing of the newly formed First Responder Network Authority, or FirstNet. FirstNet's charge of building a nationwide interoperable public safety broadband network from Washington, D.C. under the statute was crafted by our friends in the Senate. As I noted then, the structure of FirstNet was not my preferred approach to solving our nation's public safety communications challenges. I favored construction from the bottom up, not the top down, with certain minimum interoperability requirements set by the federal government and commercial providers running the network in partnership with the states. I cautioned then that this approach is not guaranteed by the legislation as passed, but that FirstNet could choose to adopt such approach. While there is significant work to be done to ensure the states are partners, not customers, of FirstNet, it appears that FirstNet's made progress in reaching out to state, tribal, and local jurisdictions along these lines. This is a significant undertaking, rivaling the network deployments of our largest national wireless carriers. Today's hearing reflects the subcommittee's commitment to continued and thorough oversight of this important effort and a dedication to ensure that our nation's public safety users realize the benefits and know the costs of the state-of-the-art communications tools that the law envisions. Now, when we met last March, the FirstNet board had only recently been assembled. Perhaps because of its infancy, there was considerable uncertainty among critical stakeholders with regard to how FirstNet was being administered and how the public safety broadband network would be realized. Unfortunately, rather than seeing those concerns wane as FirstNet has gained its footing, FirstNet finds itself embroiled in allegations from within that it lacks transparency and suffers from potential ethical conflicts. As a result, FirstNet is currently under investigation by the Inspector General of the Department of Commerce. Suffice it to say, this is not necessarily a confidence-inspiring development. But for all the efforts by FirstNet, much work remains to gain the support of the states and the tribes, the commercial wireless community, and most importantly, the first responders who will rely upon FirstNet in life or death situations. Ultimately, FirstNet needs the confidence and cooperations of all these groups to realize the standards, economies of scale, and potential that FirstNet holds. In order to do so, FirstNet must be an informative and cooperative national coordinator of the myriad moving parts that comprise the public safety community, and do so in short order. Unfortunately, this is precisely where FirstNet seems to be struggling. This challenge is best exemplified by the fact that no one seems to be able to answer the simple question, what is FirstNet? Is FirstNet going to partner with our national wireless providers, or will it be just another commercial provider in government clothing? Has FirstNet modeled the costs for these options? Are states expected to give FirstNet their existing assets as an upfront payment for participation? What's FirstNet going to charge local first responders for use of the network? Now, these are all questions that we in Congress have been asked as FirstNet struggles to find its way. And while a few jurisdictions have managed to negotiate lease agreements with FirstNet, the fundamental issues regarding cost, coverage, and timing remain unexplained, as do the processes contemplated for the exercise of a state's option to participate in the network. Now, left unresolved, the promise that we made to first responders to overcome once and for all the lack of interoperable communications is undermined, and the prospect of FirstNet's success diminished. We cannot afford to have this effort fail to produce a network, or worse, have the network deployed and then have no one show up to use it. Today we're asking our witnesses, what is working, what's not working, and how can we help? How can we help? We will hear from the chairman of the FirstNet board, who can provide an update on progress in the deployment of the public safety broadband network, address these fundamental issues, and hopefully allay our concerns about the openness and transparency of FirstNet, its processes. We'll also hear from states, the chief of the FCC's Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau, NIST, whose good work with NTIA on the Public Safety Communications Research Program is helping answer some fundamental technology questions for FirstNet, and a private sector representative who can provide their perspectives on FirstNet's progress, insights into their respective roles, and share ideas about what FirstNet can do better to get the job done. And because FirstNet will not initially provide mission-critical voice capability, and public safety will continue to rely on traditional land mobile radio systems for voice communications, we'll take the opportunity to better understand how the development of the new emergency communications technologies will be used together with traditional public safety communications until FirstNet is capable of addressing public safety's mission-critical voice needs. So I'm looking forward to hearing from our witnesses today to address these issues we've raised and hope to leave with a higher level of comfort with regard to FirstNet's progress and confidence in the manner in which it is conducting its business. That is the purpose of this hearing. I thank the witnesses for being here, and now I would yield to the gentlelady from California, Ms. Matsui, for an opening statement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I'm here in place of Ranking Member Eshoo, who will be arriving shortly. But I really want to thank everyone for being here today. I think it's an important issue, and I'm glad that we're looking at the progress that we've made here. FirstNet is a startup. Let's not forget that. And like every startup, it's had its growing pains. But since our last hearing, we've seen some progress from FirstNet. FirstNet has hit some milestones, has established a budget, and hired staff. Moving forward, we need to work together in a bipartisan manner to ensure its success. If we fail, then we jeopardize the entire system and put America's first responders at risk. It is as simple as that. Throughout the debate on the spectrum law, I remain focused on the need to responsibly govern any nationwide public safety interoperability network. I believe governance is paramount. It is critical to ensure America's first responders have an efficient and effective interoperability network. And it's also important to ensure we spend taxpayer money wisely. Despite some initial concerns about the role of states taking a back seat, I am pleased that the FirstNet board took this issue head-on and developed a strong, coordinated relationship with the states. The FirstNet board has significant responsibility. I believe the experienced individuals on the board are capable and qualified to ensure our primary goal of achieving a nationwide level of interoperability for our nation's first responders while ensuring fiscal responsibility. It is my hope that we can work together in a bipartisan manner to achieve success for America's first responders. And I yield time to Mr. Lujan.
Thank you very much to our ranking member, Matsui. And Mr. Chairman, this is an important hearing that we're having today. Quite an exciting time as we talk about the ability to change the way that we can take advantage of modern technology to ensure that first responders have the tools that they need. I was sharing with my legislative director, Andrew Jones, a few minutes ago that while I sat on the New Mexico Public Regulatory Commission, which is the equivalent of public utility commissions across the country, we were very unique in that we had the state fire marshal under our jurisdiction attached to a Department of Insurance. Again, a very unique relationship that was created. But in those conversations, getting to speak specifically to firefighters, with the tragic loss that we've recently had as well with the firefighters in Arizona who put out many fires in New Mexico, and also those that were from New Mexico. This technology that could be on the body so that there's eyes and ears around them, monitoring vital signs with them, whether they're firefighters, police officers, or any of our emergency responders for that matter, is something that I hope that we can get correct here so that we can keep more people alive, keep them safer, and truly improve our abilities to make sure that communities are safer for that matter. So I'm really excited about this. I think it's intriguing to note that many of the states as well have benefited from investments in these programs with interoperable systems as a result of the Recovery Act. I know that there's a difference of opinion sometimes with benefits, but I hope that this is one that we can agree on, that this investment was critically important, and that as we've seen roll out in many states, we can point back to the importance of investment in infrastructure. So with that, I yield back the balance of my time, and I thank the chairman, the ranking member, very much again for this important hearing.
The gentleman yields back the balance of his time and appreciate his comments. We'll now turn to the vice chair of the full committee, gentlelady from Tennessee, Ms. Blackburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate all of our witnesses being here and the opportunity to have the hearing and to do some oversight on FirstNet and look at how it is standing up. And due to the passage of the Spectrum Act, we all view public safety as an important federal government priority, but we need to do it efficiently and effectively and with a little bit of thought toward the price tag, since it is all taxpayer money. As we've seen with the botched rollout of the Obamacare site, government entities don't have all the answers when it comes to new technologies, and rolling out a nationwide interoperable public safety network is going to require significant consultation and help from the private sector. The decisions that are made today will determine the success or failure of FirstNet and its framework. That's why we need benchmarks, status updates, strong leadership that is focused, and states need to be given resources to manage their operations if they found a better way. So I thank you all for being here, and at this time I will yield to the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Latta, the balance of the time.
I thank the gentlelady for yielding, and Mr. Chairman, thank you very much for holding this hearing today, and I appreciate our distinguished witnesses for appearing to testify today. A robust public safety communications network is critical to protecting the lives and safety of the American people. We have an obligation to ensure that the implementation of FirstNet is successful and facilitates the communication needs of first responders that bravely risk their lives for ours. While I'm encouraged by some of the initial progress that FirstNet has made in the development of the nationwide network, I have concerns that FirstNet is not sufficiently engaging with states throughout the process. I look forward to the hearing from the testimony of our witnesses today, as well as the plans to ensure that FirstNet is closely consulting with states and that states have a clearly defined role and understanding of the responsibility in the terms of the planning, development, funding, and implementation of this broadband network. I thank the chairman, and I yield back.
Anyone else on the Republican side? Mr. Long, do you have any opening statement? Okay. Gentleman yields back the balance of his time. Chair now recognizes the Chairman Emeritus of the Committee, the Ranking Democrat, Mr. Waxman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Congress came together to enact the Public Safety and Spectrum Act last year, delivering on one of the last remaining recommendations from the 9/11 Commission to create a nationwide interoperable public safety broadband network for first responders. To implement this long overdue mission, Congress created the First Responder Network Authority, or FirstNet. Today we're conducting our second FirstNet oversight hearing in less than 8 months, demonstrating the committee's strong bipartisan interest in ensuring this important job is done right from the very start. And I'd like to thank Chairman Jin of the FirstNet board for testifying again and updating us on FirstNet's operations and activities. I'd also like to join my colleagues in thanking Mr. Turetsky for his service as Chief of the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau and wishing him the best of luck in his new role at the FCC. Given the magnitude of this project, it's critical that FirstNet and its partners operate efficiently and innovate aggressively. To meet this challenge, I believe FirstNet is already moving in the right direction by strengthening its operations through a sound business plan, a growing talented staff, and a fiscally prudent budget. The board is now supported by a management team with significant experience in the wireless industry, public safety communications, and financial management. FirstNet is putting its expertise to use, listening to the feedback of various stakeholders, and engaging in extensive outreach to the public safety and governmental communities, as well as vendors, carriers, and technology firms. From a technical perspective, FirstNet is laying the foundation for the network architecture through multiple requests for information that seek input from industry and other stakeholders. The Public Safety and Spectrum Act has also tasked the National Institute of Standards and Technology, or NIST, with conducting research and assisting with the development of critical standards and technologies to advance the types of public safety communications to be supported by FirstNet. And I look forward to hearing how NIST has been working with FirstNet to address the technical challenges of standing up the network. One of the many challenges FirstNet has grappled with since our last hearing is how to address the jurisdictions that received funding for public safety networks through the Broadband Technology Opportunities Program, or BTOP. I'm especially pleased that FirstNet reached an agreement with the Los Angeles Regional Interoperable Communications System Authority on its BTOP grant. I know reaching such a complex agreement was not easy, and I appreciate the tenacious good faith efforts exhibited by all parties to the agreement. The LA RICS project will not only benefit first responders in the LA region, it will also provide FirstNet with an opportunity to gather information and share lessons learned with other projects. The state of New Mexico is also moving forward with its BTOP grant, and I want to thank Dr. Darrell, Chief Information Officer of the state of New Mexico, for testifying today to discuss his state's agreement with FirstNet. And finally, I appreciate that FirstNet has acted promptly to address certain procurement and ethics-related matters. I look forward to reviewing the findings of the Department of Commerce Office of Inspector General when they have completed their audit. In conducting oversight of this fledgling organization, we all share a common interest to protect public investments and guard against waste, fraud, and abuse that may threaten the viability of the network. I hope we'll continue to work in a bipartisan way to ensure FirstNet's success. I thank you, all the witnesses, for testifying. I look forward to your testimony, and I want to apologize in advance that I have a conflict, so I won't be able to be here throughout the hearing, but I'll have a chance to review the testimony, and my staff, of course, will remain here, listen to everything that's said, and work with you on all of these issues. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back the balance of my time.
Do you want to yield your remaining 30 seconds to Ms. Eshoo?
Oh, was I supposed to do that?
Not necessarily, but...
I yield the balance of my time and maybe even some extra to Ms. Eshoo.
Thank you, Mr. Waxman, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to welcome the witnesses. I apologize for being tardy this morning. I want to thank Congresswoman Matsui for sitting in, and I look forward to both your testimony. I want to salute you, Mr. Ginn, for the work that you're doing. I'm just so impressed with what has taken place in a short period of time on a myriad of issues, and so I thank you, and I'm forgoing the fabulous opening statement that I had for everyone, but we'll place that in the record. Thank you.
I was going to have it framed, too, and put on the wall alongside mine. I want to welcome our witnesses and thank especially David Turetsky, who is the Chief Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau, Federal Communications Commission. Thanks for your service. I understand today is your last day in that role, but we appreciate your being here. We'll try not to make it your worst day in that role. And so we want to thank you for all your dedicated years of service. And I know Mr. Latta was going to introduce our witness from Ohio. If you want to just say some opening remarks about him, and then we'll get started.
Well, I appreciate that, Mr. Chairman. I want to welcome Stu Davis, who's the Chief Information Officer for the state of Ohio. Stu has been instrumental in leading Ohio's efforts statewide in public safety and emergency management communication system. He's been a leader in the IT industry, and it's an honor to have him here representing the great state of Ohio. So welcome, Mr. Davis.
We welcome all of our witnesses, and we'll start now. The man in charge has undertaken this incredibly challenging task and put a lot of effort into it, no doubt. Mr. Sam Ginn, who's the chairman of the First Responder Network Authority. Sam, thank you for being here. Thanks for your interaction with the subcommittee and your service for the country, and we look forward to your statement, sir.
Yes, well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really appreciate the opportunity, and Congresswoman Eshoo, it's nice to be here, and I hope that this session will be productive, and we'll be able to answer your questions. I'd just like to start out by making a couple of observations. We can get into all the technical issues around outreach and contracts and other things. But I want you to understand that we know who holds the responsibility for building this network. We do. And I think one of the critical issues about this bill is Congress recognized you wanted to put the responsibility on an entity, and that is us. We hold that responsibility, and we hold it with an attitude that we can get this network built. So I think we have to start there. I think the other thing that we have to recognize is this is a large, complex project, enormous scale, enormous technical issues, critical issues around outreach to the customers. And I must tell you that we understand if we don't build this system to meet the needs of public safety, it will not be successful. So I think principle one is we know we have to do that. And in the testimony, we talk about all kind of outreach and things that we're doing to understand the requirements of public safety. And that information is being filtered into the technical organization as we design the system. So we will have time to get into those issues, but I don't want us to miss a larger point. And this is it. When we build this network, and we will build this network, it's going to revolutionize public safety in ways that we don't even understand. It's like most revolutions. When they start out, you know things are going to be different. But when this network is in place, we're going to revolutionize public safety. Let me give you an analogy, and a simple one. I want you to think back when you got your first cell phone and how you used it. And now I want you to think back, given the app engine and the applications that are available for you to download, how has it affected your day-to-day life? And I would say significantly. And the point I want to make to you is when this network goes in place, we will see the innovation and creativity of public safety all across the country, where they step up and solve local issues, local situations that basically lower their cost or serve the public better or increase their own safety. So I don't want us to lose the larger point in this conversation, simply to say that we're going to get this done, and when we do, I think there will be a tremendous advantage, not only to public safety, but to citizens of the country and all of us who are worried about the cost of providing services to the country. My sense is we can take them down dramatically. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Again, thank you. They have called votes, and so I think what we'll do before proceeding with others is go ahead now and recess the committee. We've got a couple of votes, I believe, and then we will be back as soon after the votes as our members can get here, and we will resume this hearing. So with that, we will stand in recess. I understand you got hard. We'll call back to order the Subcommittee on Communications and Technology, and my apologies that the votes went longer than anticipated, but we have returned, and we appreciate testimony of Mr. Ginn, and I think we were just going to Mr. Turetsky when we had to take a break. So, sir, if you'll turn on that microphone, pull it close, we'll resume our hearing.
Thank you, Chairman, Ranking Member, and Vice Chairman. Thank you for this opportunity to discuss the FCC's efforts to support FirstNet through implementation of the Middle Class Tax Relief and Job Creation Act of 2012 and our ongoing mission to enhance public safety and emergency communications. Traditional public safety land mobile systems continue to provide mission-critical voice capability for first responders and will continue to do so for some time and must be maintained. But they cannot support the data-rich applications that are more and more necessary for public safety personnel to do their jobs. In part, that's why Congress passed the Act to create a nationwide interoperable wireless broadband network for the public safety community. As Chairman Wheeler stated earlier this week, Communications networks are changing and fast. And where technological change and public safety intersect, there are both challenges and opportunities. Congress included some specific tasks for the FCC to support FirstNet's mission when it passed the Act in February 2012. For example, it directed the FCC to establish the Technical Advisory Board for First Responder Interoperability within 30 days. That board then had 90 days to develop minimum technical requirements to ensure a nationwide level of interoperability for the FirstNet network. The Commission then had 30 days to approve and transmit the recommendations to FirstNet. The Commission met each of these deadlines. Beyond these specific tasks, the Commission has also worked to fulfill its statutory obligation to, quote, take all actions necessary to facilitate the transition, close quote, of the 700 megahertz public safety broadband spectrum to FirstNet. Last month, the Commission unanimously adopted a report and order that established the basic technical rules for the FirstNet spectrum. Those rules will not only help to accomplish goals like preventing interference, but, vitally, will give vendors guidance they need to compete and innovate and enable the Commission to certify equipment promptly. These rules are supported by the record and are consistent with comments from FirstNet and others. We recognize that we still have more to address under the law. For example, in some areas, there are incumbent public safety narrowband operations in the FirstNet spectrum, which predate the designation of this spectrum for broadband use. The Act also provides that if a state seeks to exercise its opt-out rights, the Commission must either approve or disapprove the state's opt-out plans based on specific statutory criteria. We intend to provide clear guidance to the states and FirstNet on how that will work before states have to choose whether to opt out. The Commission is also considering how best to implement the T-band provisions of the Act, which require future relocation of those public safety systems and auction of the vacated spectrum. The Bureau issued a public notice on this and received comments over the summer. We will work with all stakeholders and our federal partners to ensure that these transitions occur seamlessly and transparently as much as possible. Next, the public safety community faces another transition to NG911, which can revolutionize the way the public seeks help. This is tightly interwoven with the FirstNet network, as NG911 and the FirstNet network can be complementary components of an end-to-end broadband ecosystem. Public safety call centers will serve as hubs for data from 911 callers, such as photos or film clips, which can then be disseminated to first responders through the FirstNet network. One step the FCC is taking to facilitate the transition to NG911 is to advance text to 911. People expect to be able to use the means of communications that they use every day to get help, and text messaging is part of the fabric of modern life. It also is the only practical or safe way to reach out for help in some circumstances. Also, wireless calls to 911 increasingly originate indoors. Obtaining an accurate location for those callers can be a challenge, and we held a major workshop at the FCC about that earlier this week. Finally, I want to mention the successful use of wireless emergency alerts to warn the public of emergencies. Just this past weekend, mobile users in the path of tornadoes in Illinois received warnings from the National Weather Service sent via the wireless emergency alert system. Reports are that this helped some people get to safety before the tornado struck. Since implementation in the summer of 2012, WEA, as we call it, warnings have helped to recover kidnapped children, evacuate areas during Superstorm Sandy, and otherwise alert people to get to safety in an emergency. In closing, transition is the watchword, and the Commission intends to achieve it by working with all stakeholders in a transparent and responsible manner. Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks to the FCC for their good work in this area and meeting the deadlines. We'll go now to Mr. Darrell Ackley, who's the Cabinet Secretary for the New Mexico Department of Information and Technology. Mr. Ackley, thank you for being here today, and thanks for your patience. We look forward to your testimony, sir.
Well, good morning, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member, members of the subcommittee. Thank you as well for the opportunity to be here today to present on the status of the project in New Mexico in public safety broadband. Excited to be here today. I am the Chief Information Officer for the State of New Mexico and Cabinet Secretary over the Information Technology Department, appointed in February of 2011 by Governor Susana Martinez when she took office. I also serve as the representative from the National Association of State Chief Information Officers to the FirstNet Public Safety Advisory Committee, but asked to be here today to update specifically on the activities within the State of New Mexico. A little bit of background, the IT department in New Mexico is the enterprise service provider for the state in traditional domain, but we also operate the public safety land mobile radio communication network for our state's first responders and officials, to include a fairly large tower asset and land mobile radio component. We operate that in a chargeback manner and provide hopefully great service for our citizens in the state. In 2010, New Mexico was one of the applicants and recipients of a BTOP grant to build out both additional digital microwave infrastructure within the state, but also to deploy a pilot broadband program, LTE, within the then 10 megahertz of spectrum that were dedicated for public safety under the Public Safety Spectrum Trust. In 2011, when I took the office, we incorporated that into a comprehensive plan to modernize public safety communications within the state of New Mexico along three areas. One, having a resilient and robust backhaul infrastructure. This is towers, etc. The second, to address critical gaps in our state's land mobile radio communications. But third, and in line with our BTOP grant, to deploy public safety broadband within the state. And we saw these three as being very compatible with one another. As part of that plan, we began work in earnest on the tower upgrades, which are nearly complete, providing us a digital microwave backbone. At the juncture we were about to deploy in the LTE for the public safety broadband, of course, in 2012 was when the Spectrum Act was passed, creating FirstNet and opening the D block for use by that entity. Our grant was partially suspended in that regard in the LTE while the FirstNet board was brought into being, while they organized and got moving. In December of 2012, so about a year ago, we were visited by board members Jeff Johnson and Sue Swenson to review our BTOP program as they visited all the BTOP waiver recipients. At that time, we presented our original plan for a build-out in that LTE spectrum, but also provided some alternative plans to work with the board through in case they wanted to see some different options. We presented a pilot project build out along the southwest border that we thought could have some impact in our state, but also provide some valuable learning conditions to the board. Then that had quite a bit of resonance. So from that point on, we began working with the FirstNet board as well as with folks at NTIA and FCC to develop that into a pilot project, as well as begin negotiations with the FirstNet board for a lease and the spectrum so that we could begin to build that out. Over the course of about 6 months, we iterated with them. We worked through that negotiation. Of course, it was, any negotiation has its ups and downs. New Mexico very much wanted to make sure that what we had in place would serve our citizens and our constituents, but also give us flexibility, and I'm sure with FirstNet give them the flexibility that they needed. Proud to say we accomplished that. We have a non-exclusive statewide lease in that spectrum and are working towards developing the RFP to proceed with the Southwest Border project. We've been granted that lease with 3 key learning conditions that, in conjunction with the FirstNet board, we developed for that build-out. And those key learning conditions are one, demonstrating the ability of cross-jurisdictional interaction by working with the deployed corps in Harris County, Texas. The second being looking at the frequency issues, the spectrum issues associated with operating on the U.S.-Mexico border, and what that's going to mean on a larger scale as the FirstNet build-out rolls out. And then third, the opportunity to potentially incorporate federal users onto that system as we deploy, given the presence of Customs and Border Patrol, Immigrations and Customs, and other federal operations along that boundary. So at that point, we're working on deploying or publishing the RFPs to start the first phase of this operation, and hope to begin that in the first quarter of 2014. With that, my time's about up, and I'd love to answer any questions that you have later.
All right, Mr. Ackley, thank you very much. We look forward to learning more about the experience that New Mexico's had. Sounds like it's been a good one. Mr. Davis, we're delighted to have you here. Mr. Stu Davis is the State Chief Information Officer and Assistant Director of the Ohio Department of Administrative Services. We are very appreciative that you were able to join us, and we look forward to your testimony too, sir. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Chairman Walden, Ranking Member Eshoo, and members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today on FirstNet and the Nationwide Public Safety Broadband Network Initiative. My name is Stu Davis. I'm currently serve as the Ohio State Chief Information Officer and the Assistant Director of the Ohio Department of Administrative Services. As the state CIO, I lead, oversee, and direct state agency activities related to information technology development and its use. As Assistant Director of DAS, I oversee the Office of Information Technology, which delivers information technology and telecommunications services to state government agencies, boards, and commissions. I also serve as the chair of the Multi-Agency Radio Communication Systems, MARCS, on that steering committee, which is Ohio's land mobile radio system that supports voice and data communications of statewide public safety and emergency management. I also chair Ohio's Emergency Service IP Network, EZNet, steering committee focused on Ohio's next-gen 911 solution. The Ohio General Assembly had concerns about FirstNet and passed Senate Concurrent Resolution 15 earlier this year. Specific concerns were around the business plan, the cost the state would bear, either mandated or obligated, the ability to opt out with no cost if not appropriate for Ohio, to have written assurances that it would exceed current levels of service in the areas of reliability, redundancy, and state-based system control, as well as fair market compensation for access and utilization of state-owned assets in support of network deployment. It called for this subcommittee to continue these meetings, and we commend you for doing so. Thank you. FirstNet outreach has significantly improved, is more consistent than we've seen in the past, which is great. We still have questions regarding requirements, user community roles and responsibilities, the overarching business case, and defined businesses and operational models, and of course near and long-term funding. We need to have further insight into these components so we can properly plan for future initiatives. It's important that FirstNet views relationships with the state as a partnership, and that continues. Currently, the planning grants available to states are focused on outreach and education. For FirstNet to be successful, they need to focus on the development of those relationships with the state, modifying their approach to be one of engagement, not product marketing to states. An example of partnering would be strong engagement on the requirements and the definition of roles and responsibilities. It would make sense to have individual state discussions and perhaps negotiate these terms before releasing an RFP to build out FirstNet. If this does not take place, there will be very little time for the states to react and determine the best path forward. If we're not part of those negotiations, those details of a blanket RFP prior to its release, it will be detrimental to both parties. There are numerous requirements that need to be defined before architecting a solution. This runs the gamut from user to technical to operational requirements. It's difficult to architect a solution to undefined user requirements and without clear expectations. FirstNet needs to be extremely sensitive to the fact that moving full steam ahead on identifying the technical aspects of the system several months before regional outreach positions are in place can be a little risky. Choosing technical specifications in the absence of understanding the needs of the state could also be detrimental to the long-term viability of the network. We need to know these requirements and understand what the impact of these efforts will have on existing Ohio initiatives. In Ohio, this would be MARCS. It would also be the consideration of other statewide initiatives, such as Next Generation 911, which should be viewed as a component of FirstNet. Several states, including Ohio, have stated that current Next Gen design efforts have must integrate with FirstNet in the future. Understanding the impact on MARCS as well as Next Generation 911 is critical to our planning process. We would also like to see the business model. I understand the difficulties there, but it's critical for us to be able to understand the sustainability of the effort that we have going forward. Building the cost recovery and usage rates will be instrumental in the adoption of the effort. The answer I get is build and ongoing costs will be supported through partnerships with the state and subscription from early adopters. I don't believe this is sustainable. Someone has to pay for operations while adoption ramps up and takes place. The concern would be the responsibility for the operational costs, and more to the point, adoption of MARCS at $20 a month gets significant pushback from some of our user community. Volunteer firefighters push back on $240 a year to have an operational radio on our system. How will they pay for both? I would like to better understand these aspects before we can move forward a little bit. Again, with the capital investment from federal government, where is the revenue to sustain the FirstNet operations in each state? The interpretation of public safety use only must be clearly defined. Without the revenue from broad secondary use of excess capacity, the model may not be sustainable. In Ohio, we're working through IT optimization efforts to align all our IT assets, resources, and current expenditures to reduce duplication of effort and increase efficiencies of the benefit to the citizen. A key of this is adoption and leveraging of past investments. We're expending dollars today to support law enforcement and first responders. These past investments I mentioned, Marks and Next Generation 911, there has to be a path forward to protect those current and previous investments so that these systems are integrated and leveraged. We need to be able to plan and forecast impacts and direction of current efforts to be able to align with FirstNet. Understanding the operational costs and potential costs of the user community will be directly related to law enforcement and first responder adoption. I understand that FirstNet will also leverage or attempt to leverage existing vertical assets that the state currently owns, lease, or is carrying debt on. There are financial, legal, jurisdictional issues regarding use of existing state, local, and private assets. There are numerous bonding and legal considerations that must be thought through for many states. We continue to have concerns about funding, and it's important to note that after having said all these things, I am supportive of the concept of the next nationwide public safety broadband network, and I believe Ohio is uniquely positioned to take advantage of the significant opportunity to coordinate and converge multiple efforts. These efforts include Marks as well as the Ohio Next Generation system, and I look forward to the opportunity to partner on this effort and ensure impacts to current initiatives are in alignment with Ohio's direction. Thank you very much.
Mr. Davis, thank you for your testimony. I think you've summed it up well. We all want it to work and be affordable. And that's what we're striving to get to. Mr. Derek Orr is the Program Manager, Public Safety Communications Research, Office of Law Enforcement Standards, National Institute of Standards and Technology. That's a long title, but we're glad you're here, and we look forward to your testimony, sir. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Chairman Walden, Ranking Member Eshoo, members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today to discuss the advancement of public safety wireless communications. I serve as the Program Manager for the Public Safety Communications Research Program, which is a joint effort between the National Institute of Standards and Technology and the National Telecommunications and Information Administration at the Department of Commerce Labs located in Boulder, Colorado. The Public Safety Communications Research Program serves as the technical lead for several administration initiatives focused on public safety communications. Our longest-standing program sponsor is the Department of Homeland Security's Office of Interoperability and Compatibility within the Science and Technology Directorate. The PSCR program is also involved in many of DHS's communications interoperability-related programs, including the SAFECOM program within the Office of Emergency Communications. Additionally, PSCR is sponsored by the First Responder Network Authority to advance public safety broadband communication standards and is developing additional research projects related to public safety broadband communications that the PSCR is uniquely qualified to execute. NIST greatly appreciates as well the confidence that Congress placed in NIST by allocating critical funding for public safety communications research and development in the legislation that established FirstNet. Working alongside our federal partners, the PSCR program has played the lead technical role in key advancement in public safety communications over the last decade. In 2010, the PSCR program, in partnership with DHS, deployed in the Boulder area a first-of-its-kind, fourth-generation, long-term evolution 700 megahertz public safety broadband demonstration network. This network was developed in collaboration with industry through cooperative research and development agreements between NIST, NTIA, and over 75 individual industry partners to date. This public-private partnership has resulted in one of the most vendor-diverse 4G LTE networks in the world. The demonstration network allows PSCR to test and evaluate key broadband features critical to public safety, including multi-vendor interoperability, indoor in-building coverage, and extended cell coverage possibilities for rural areas. In addition, future work will focus on priority access and quality of service for the network. As part of PSCR's modeling and simulation efforts, PSCR conducts performance analysis of advanced communications networks using commercially available and in-house customized network modeling simulation tools. In support of the nationwide public safety broadband network, PSCR develops metrics and tools used to characterize the performance of LTE networks, which will help inform decision-making about network design. PSCR continues to lead the requirements development efforts for the public safety broadband, working directly in support of the National Public Safety Telecommunications Council. NIPSTIC's broadband working group has developed requirements documents for mission-critical voice, local control, and priority and quality of service that clearly define public safety's expectations of the nationwide broadband network capabilities. In December 2012, NIPSTIC delivered the Public Safety Broadband launch requirements to the FirstNet Board of Directors and the Public Safety Advisory Committee. The launch requirements define public safety's expectations for the nationwide network at launch. More recently, NIPSTIC delivered push-to-talk over LTE requirements to FirstNet. Current requirements efforts focus on the definition of public safety grade as it applies to the nationwide broadband network. These requirements documents are used as the fundamental basis of PSCR's formal standards development efforts related to LTE on behalf of FirstNet and the public safety community. Based upon testing and evaluation, modeling and simulation, and requirements gathering efforts, all of which inform the standards development effort at PSCR, there have been significant advances in the commercial LTE standards specific to public safety. In December 2012, public safety was identified as the #1 priority for the current version of LTE standards being developed within the Third Generation Partnership Project, which is the official standards development organization for LTE. This is a major accomplishment given public safety's limited user base compared to the worldwide commercial wireless user base. With this added momentum and as part of the NIPSTIC mission critical voice requirements, PSCR is addressing the two largest gaps identified in LTE's ability to support mission critical voice capabilities, which are direct mode, device-to-device communications, and group communications. PSCR also has recently launched an effort to standardize mission critical push-to-talk LTE within 3GPP. And finally, working in the international standards community alongside public safety from other countries will lead to a global public safety LTE marketplace. This should decrease costs while increasing the availability of advanced features to the worldwide public safety community. In conclusion, PSCR will continue its public safety-driven approach to advancing communications technologies for our nation's first responders, and we look forward to continuing expanding our valuable partnerships across public safety, local, state, tribal, and federal government organizations, as well as industry. Again, I am honored to be here before the subcommittee today, and I am happy to answer any questions you might have.
Mr. Orr, thank you for your testimony. We appreciate that. And now, because we have a lot of doctors before our committee, we can't have a hearing without at least a doctor on the panel. Dr. Dennis M. Martinez, Chief Technology Officer, RF Communications Division, Harris Corporation. Dr. Martinez, we're delighted to have you here, and we look forward to your expert testimony.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Eshoo, and members of the subcommittee. Thank you for inviting me to testify today on FirstNet and the advancement of public safety wireless communications. I previously testified before this committee on May 21st of 2011 during the hearing on creating an interoperable public safety broadband network. Last year, I served as an appointed member of the Technical Advisory Board for First Responder Interoperability. In that role, I joined leaders representing state and local governments, public safety entities, wireless service providers, and equipment manufacturers in developing the recommended minimum technical requirements to ensure nationwide interoperability for the National Public Safety Broadband Network. These requirements were conveyed by the FCC to FirstNet, and as required by law, will be incorporated in future RFPs issued by FirstNet. I'm here today to provide this committee with a technical perspective on FirstNet's mission and activities with the goal of informing the committee on areas of progress since passage of the landmark legislation last year. There are 4 activities that I will address: pilot projects, standards development, regulatory policy, and response to FirstNet inquiries. Since January 2012, Harris has implemented pilot LTE projects in 5 jurisdictions. Most recently, Harris conducted live demonstrations of a deployable solution in remote Northern California that is not served by commercial broadband networks. These pilot projects utilize public safety broadband spectrum and were implemented almost entirely at Harris' expense. And we received support from the FCC and the FirstNet team, who facilitated and approved short-term spectrum use authorizations. We had several objectives for launching these projects. First, we aimed at creating a learning experience for public safety entities that wanted first-hand knowledge of the existing prospects or the exciting prospects promised by the eventual broadband network. Additionally, we sought learning experiences that would advance our own understanding of how to apply this state-of-the-art commercial technology in a mission-critical setting. Our findings were simple but profound. First, while there were many public safety entities that currently use commercial broadband networks in day-to-day operations, the prospect of a dedicated network optimized for their mission-critical needs is highly valued. In fact, many of these entities are anxious to support deployment of the broadband network in their jurisdiction. Secondly, commercial LTE technology can be configured through rigorous design practices to support some mission-critical needs today. The key gap that currently exists is mission-critical voice. Notwithstanding that, we successfully demonstrated technology that permits interoperability between legacy mission-critical radio systems and services that operate over Band 14 LTE. That brings me to the second topic area, which is the development of standards that will support mission-critical voice on the broadband network and enable nationwide interoperability. Several activities are underway in 3GPP, TIA, and ADIS that are addressing this need. Under the Spectrum Act, FirstNet must represent the interests of public safety users in these standards development activities, and to do so in consultation with the Director of NIST, the FCC, and the Public Safety Advisory Committee. Although not explicitly noted in the Spectrum Act, we also believe there is significant benefit for FirstNet to consult and collaborate in this process, with private sector entities likely supplying the required products and services that implement these emerging standards. In addition to the development of standards, continuing evolution of the regulatory framework for FirstNet will be important to its success. As a manufacturer of LTE user equipment, Harris is pleased with the significant milestone that was achieved earlier when the FCC released the first iteration of Band 14 service rules. These rules are a significant step, and one that is required for OEMs to continue their investment in products and technologies that FirstNet will need in its deployment and first responders will need in order to operate on the NPSBN. Toward that goal and in advance of these final requirements, we note that FirstNet has done significant work to require that early build-outs are interoperable and should be commended for supporting efforts to make procurements for these projects competitive and multi-vendor. Finally, we commend the FirstNet team on their significant success and progress in their RFI process. That has given us, the private sector, a significant window of visibility into potential requirements for equipment and services that they will procure. As FirstNet completes its state-local collaboration and begins finalization of the technical requirements for the broadband network, we encourage FirstNet to engage the private sector at each opportunity. This is an essential step for continued investment by the private sector in FirstNet, which in turn is important for timely availability of products and services that FirstNet will need to procure. In closing, I once again thank the committee for inviting me to testify on this matter of great importance to the American public. Harris remains eager to support FirstNet and this committee to make this happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Martinez. We appreciate your testimony. We go to questions now. Mr. Ginn, in my opening statement, I expressed a concern we've heard from a number of potential partners and stakeholders, namely that FirstNet doesn't seem to know what it wants to be. I don't mean that as a personal criticism. It's a question I think I'd like to get to Mr. Ackley and Mr. Davis. One state says we're good to go and it all worked well. The other state is saying, not so sure, and what this is going to mean in the long-term costs and implications. And so I guess my question would be, can you tell us what is FirstNet's plan to realize this network?
Well, that's going to take a few moments. First off, on the principle of working with other states, it is from our point of view, needs to be a joint effort. Mm-hmm. It should be jointly negotiated. When we reach the point where we have completed the RFP and present it to the states, there will be no surprises in Ohio as to what is in that document.
So let me stop you there for a second, because that was one of the issues Mr. Davis raised, is how that communication on the RFP will take place, correct, Mr. Davis?
That is correct. I think what we want to make sure of is that the collaboration piece stays in place and that those technical documents that go out to...
Yeah. And by the way, I agree with that. As a matter of fact, if you look at our work plan for 2014, we're establishing 10 regional offices that complement FEMA areas, and their sole responsibility is going to be working with states in coming up with radio access networks to feed into the national grid. So maybe one of the issues here is his expectation is beyond our ability to deliver. But when you think about it takes 4 to 8 months to hire a single employee in the federal government, you don't get these things done that quickly. So my comment to Mr. Davis would be, work with us. We want to do this as partners. We will, hopefully at the end of this, we will have agreed on a network plan for Ohio. And when it's presented, you will know all the details even before it's presented.
So the other issue that I believe you raised, Mr. Davis, was the long-term financial stability of FirstNet, kind of what you're buying into and what it's going to cost you long-term, right? And what about state assets? Do you think you're going to be asked to put all your assets in the pot and say goodbye to them and then be part of FirstNet with an open-ended cost potentially down the road? Is that the concern Ohio has?
I think it has a variety of different components to it, and I think we just have to work through those things. And it is sort of a step-by-step process, and every state is going to have similar issues in terms of leveraging existing assets, even if it's lease space and things that we have going on. And phase 2 of the planning grants that are out there will hopefully address some of those things. But the questions that we get when we go out and do the outreach components within Ohio all come back to what's the cost. We recognize that we don't know those things today, but the more that we can have a sustainable business model, at least identify through that process, the better off we're all going to be in the long run.
To give you some idea of the complexity of this, 70% of the cost of the network is going to be in cell site locations. Okay,
right.
It's a high percentage. It matters in the total economics. If we could get each state and the federal government to allow us to use those without fees, it would dramatically reduce the cost of this network. Okay, now he would.
Well, that was one of our original ideas. I think was to build from the state up, and not create a separate set of systems. But
yeah, I guess the way I would say that, maybe a little differently, we have to start out with a system, a core that covers the entire United States, and then we have to make sure that state systems are compatible with connecting into that core around interoperability and security and reliability and all the other issues that we will mandate.
So, Mr. Ackley, in the 11 seconds I have left, what gave you confidence in your state to go ahead and enter into this arrangement?
Oh, well, Mr. Chairman, I think the fact that New Mexico had done some substantial work in this arena before the passage of the Spectrum Act, so this was something that we were already incorporating into our planning and working towards, and I think that gave us a position to be able to work with the FirstNet board from some assumptions we had developed early on with respect to.
And you're comfortable with the long-term potential cost implications and the ability to afford participation down the road?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I think there are a lot of good points that are raised here that need to be addressed. You know, comfort is something that's going to increase, I think, as these issues are addressed. You know, things such as asset, cost allocation and recovery, the usage, the business model, and those sorts of things. I think from our position, it's something, if we can maintain the involvement as a state in working with FirstNet on this, that we can continue to develop that comfort.
All right. My time's expired, and I'm going to turn the gavel over to Mr. Latta, and I'm going to recognize Ms. Eshu for questions. I have to excuse myself to take a meeting, but I want to thank you all and know that we're concerned, want to make sure this all works for first responders and for the country. We commend the work that's been done. I know it's a huge startup, and we just want to continue to do our appropriate oversight. I'd recognize the gentlelady from California.
Thank you to each one of you for traveling here and for your excellent written testimony as well as the spoken testimony, and for your patience. Inevitably, when we have some of the most, what I think are some of the most important hearings, the bells go off, and you have to wait. So thank you for your patience. Mr. Ginn, thank you for your leadership. This is a heavy lift, and it's somewhat complicated. It's not as if we don't have any systems in our country. We do. The problem is they're not interoperable. And these systems have been in place longer, obviously. They have a history. What we're doing now is really rewriting history. And so there's a push and a pull in different places. I understand it. Change is not easy to make, and it's menacing to people that have done it a certain way for a long, long time. I don't hold it against them, but I think the signal is, you know what? We're on the move. This has to change. It has to change because of what our country endured. So thank you for your leadership, and I think that your credentials from the private sector are superb, and I don't want to say it's good to hear about your frustrations, but it also demonstrates that it's difficult to merge the public and the private. But I have confidence in you. I really do. Now, on the in September, the FCC, Mr. Ginn, announced this landmark voluntary industry solution to achieve interoperability in the lower 700 megahertz band. What I'd like to know is what steps is FirstNet taking to leverage this opportunity, if in fact you can, and do you think that the agreement is going to provide first responders with more roaming opportunities and greater redundancy? I'm very excited about what's
you're talking about the interoperable task force at the FCC that gave us the standards?
No, this is the voluntary solution that was agreed upon with industry stakeholders. If you're not familiar with it, I can go on to another question. Yeah, no, I can go on to another question. I have 2 minutes and 23 seconds, and a trip out to Dulles. To Dr. Martinez, thank you for being here again. In your testimony, you talked about the importance of developing standards for mission-critical voice, and that's a very, very important area. Does the absence of such a standard prevent your company from supporting build-out projects? I'm not so sure from your testimony if that's the case. And I mean, the examples would be Los Angeles or the state of New Mexico.
Congresswoman Eshoo, no, it does not. The absence of a standard is not a prerequisite to proceed with the BTOP program. Mm-hmm. However, to the extent that such a program would have a requirement for mission-critical voice, then we have to ensure that the implementation of that requirement in the BTOP program would not preclude future compatibility with whatever FirstNet chooses as a mission-critical standard.
So it complicates it? Is that what you're saying?
I'd say it's a factor that has to be considered, but it should certainly not be a showstopper for proceeding with the BTOP project.
Okay.
And by the way, not all BTOP projects would necessarily require a mission-critical voice component.
Good. Back to Mr. Ginn. You know that I've had I've been involved in 911, next generation 911, the 911 issues going back to the 90s, obviously long before our country was attacked. Do you see the next gen 911 being integrated into what FirstNet is doing?
I absolutely do. When you think about, as I understand, Next Gen 911, you're not only going to be able to take voice, but you're going to be able to take data, photographs, and other capabilities. Well, guess what? LTE is data-centric. It has a great capability to transmit data. And so the way I see it very simply is information coming into the 911 centers can very easily be sent right to a law enforcement officer at a point in the district in seconds.
That's wonderful. So we'll be integrated.
Yeah, I just see us as a real enabler to adding benefits to next generation.
Bravo. Thank you. Yield back.
The gentlelady from California yields back, and the chair will recognize himself for 5 minutes. And again, thanks very much for you all being here today. Really appreciate your testimony. And it's very informative because when we had the hearing earlier this year to find out where we've gone and come from that time frame. And Mr. Davis, if I could ask you a few questions, especially coming from the Ohio perspective. Some of the things that were brought up, especially by the folks that were here earlier this year from Maryland, Virginia, and their concerns, is to get your perspective as to where you think things are and where they were earlier this year. And in your testimony, when you talk about the partnership versus the customer, and particularly on the partnering, you said would be stronger engagement on the requirements and the determination of roles and responsibilities. Do you see that things have tightened up, that there's more back and forth between FirstNet and the states, and that you have a contact out there that you can get to all the time?
Yes, we do. We have made significant progress. FirstNet in the outreach component has done an excellent job. Their message is consistent, and there is a point of contact for us. As a matter of fact, I believe we have a meeting on Friday this week. So the communication piece is moving forward very well, that component of it. And the point that we just need to make sure we understand is that we're making decisions at the state level on a variety of different initiatives that we have going on, Next Generation 911 being one, and the architecting of that. If there are things that we can do that will better position our initiative in Ohio to support FirstNet and vice versa, those are the types of activities that we want to talk through.
Well, I think also you mentioned in your testimony into the planning and development, especially in the state of Ohio, and the 11 years that I served in the General Assembly, working on the MARC system at that time. There was a lot of discussion and the cost, et cetera, and also the LMR. Is that being considered and taken into account, especially for the amount of money that Ohio has invested over all those years, especially like in MARCs?
I think absolutely it is. I think that it's the mission critical piece that we have. There's 1,300 different disparate systems that we're trying to push forward to move into MARCs as a shared service model. Very similar, I would imagine, to some of the things that we're hearing from FirstNet. And we would like to engage and partner in that because we have partnering tiers that we set up that it would be, I think, valuable for FirstNet to understand how we're operating today.
And pardon me for interrupting, because you said you would like to. Are you being taken into those discussions, or because you said like to, is that you are or aren't getting that information in there? In those
I think those things are starting now. They started about three months ago. We didn't get the grant for the planning side through our controlling board process until September. So things in the last month have moved quickly. In the last 6 weeks, things have been significantly better, and that communication is ramping up.
Well, and also, just not wanting to pick on you here, especially in your testimony, you're talking about especially the volunteer firefighters and the pushback, as you say in your testimony, on the $240 a year to have an operational radio on our system in Ohio. And I tell you, I know with my 14 counties, and the backbone out there is that volunteer fire department. And, I go to a lot of chicken barbecues and pancake days and fish fries, and for all of the things that those folks are doing out there to protect their friends and neighbors, they just can't take a lot of mandates out there. So, where's the cost going to be, or the dollars going to be coming from for those folks out there across the state of Ohio and across the nation for these volunteers to pay for this?
What a great question. It's something we wrestle with all the time with the MARC system today, as you well know. We're looking at everything that we can possibly do to try to lower those costs as much as possible. A lot of that is economy of scale, and the more municipalities, the more counties that come on board to the radio system will drive those costs down and make that at least a little bit more affordable. I know that we're looking at different ways to try to figure out how to crack that volunteer component, because $240 a year doesn't sound like much, but when you have 10 volunteers, that's a lot of money. And at some point in time, those events happen. We need to engage with those people, and it is critical to the response in that area.
And just real briefly in my last 20 seconds, on that economy of scales, when you're looking at the economy of scales, you're talking about, like, for the volunteers across the state, or are you looking at particular areas in the state of Ohio?
We're looking at the volunteers across the state of Ohio, but we're also looking at the 1,300 different disparate systems out there as they fold in and we've got quite a bit of success here in probably the last 8 months in getting counties and their radio systems into our system and leveraging their assets and some of the assets that we have to benefit both the county as well as the statewide effort that we have going on.
Thank you. My time's expired, and I recognize the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Shimkus, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here. I, along with Anna, have been working in the first responder issues for a long time in 911, so we're pleased we're here. Some of us would have liked to have gotten here a different way, but this is the rules of the road now. And so, Mr. Davis, compelling testimony because your folks are my constituents. I represent a third of the state, and so, Mr. Gann, I hope you really take heed to some of these concerns in Mr. Davis's opening in his testimony. I keep highlighting and he makes some compelling arguments, and you know, we work for those volunteer fire departments or those small communities, and we have to get this right. You have a great success in the private sector, and I always wonder when the private sector experts come to government and how they get chewed up in the bureaucracy. I mean, you give a great example of the 4 months in hiring an employee. I mean, that's government. And that makes it challenging. But your opening statement was right on. You got to get it built, and you got to get it built right. And I applaud that focus. I would also add you got to get built within budget. And this business model debate that's raised by Mr. Davis, not just at your end, but also down at that end, Aaron, because I know in this debate, one of the underlying things was, don't worry, the government will bring you more money if you don't get it right, and I don't think you can assume that.
Can I respond to
please.
that? You know, I take the $7 billion as a personal and organizational challenge. And if you have a moment, let me tell you how I think about it, because
I want to get to LTE too, so don't. Yes, I do have a moment, but don't
okay.
take my 3 minutes.
Okay. You know, the first thing you need to understand, what is the cost of the network? And you ought to spend a lot of time trying to drive down the cost of that network, as I was suggesting about free cell sites in states in federal buildings.
Right.
Because that would dramatically decrease the cost of providing the network. You've got a couple other costs. You've got to stand up an organization. We're doing that now. We're putting people in 10 regional offices to work with Ohio and other places. And then we'll reach a point.
Let's just go here and say you're going to do your utmost to have an efficient system that's going to be cost effective, and you're going to try to deploy what's been requested.
And the point I want to make to you is simply this, that if we get to the bottom line and we're not there, we're going to reiterate the whole process and look to take out other costs. So
I just raise it because there's a concern not just at your level, at the local level, and we got to get the cost right too. Otherwise, we're not going to be where we want to be. Let me go. You did talk about LTE and the great technology and the data stuff, but mission critical voice is also an important aspect of this debate. Can you explain, FirstNet, this is also for Mr. Orr, on obviously the voice aspect of this. That's part of the application with NIST. And where are we at with that?
So just to be clear, NIPSTIC defined mission critical voice, and that's a group of public safety associations, as the ability to talk directly from one device to another, so direct mode, push to talk, like public safety uses now with their radios, full duplex voices, which is how we talk on our cell phones right now, where you can talk over each other, group call, so that you talk one to many, talker identification like caller ID, emergency alerting, so I hit a button and I get automatic access to the network if I'm in an emergency situation, and audio quality, so that you can actually hear me in difficult environments like firefighters and police often work in. The most challenging aspects for mission critical voice right now are really the top three, which are dealing with push to talk capability, group communications, and direct mode, device to device, because those aren't issues that are being dealt with by the commercial community right now. So that's what we're working in LTE, and that's what we've had actually very significant progress in the LTE standards, and we're working closely with the other countries around the world that are also deploying their own public safety LTE networks, because every single one of them needs this mission critical voice capability. So our expectation, at least from a PSCR perspective, is within the next 18 to 24 months, we'd like to start seeing prototypes in our laboratories that display this capability, that we can at least start assessing, testing, and then, as Chairman Ginn said, reiterating on the standards to ensure that these products someday actually do meet the capabilities of the current land mobile radio systems.
Great, and I'll just end on this. The Seattle Times, of all papers, wrote an article about the tornadoes that went through my district and a lot of the Midwest, Ohio, and Indiana, and how people's lives were saved through the communication to their cell phones and the like. Obviously, the people didn't have access to that, may not have got as clear a warning as it could have, but we're getting there. But there is concerns about the top-down, the business model, and I would hope you work with our local providers because they are the key to this and making it work.
If you take nothing else away from here, you need to understand that I understand that if you don't satisfy your customers, you don't have a business.
Amen. Yield back.
Well, thank you very much. The gentleman yields back the balance of his time, and for Chairman Walden and also for Ranking Member Eshoo, we want to thank you again for your testimony today and your patience when we had to go to vote. We greatly appreciate that. And if there's nothing further to come before the committee, the subcommittee will stand adjourned.